In my opinion, the best way to enjoy the Nintendo 64 and its games in 2025 is to use original hardware. But of course, the price of games are a factor. Thankfully, the N64 has seen flash cart solutions like the EverDrive on the market for years. These flash carts offer near 100% compatibility with any N64 ROM, that is, either official or homebrew. And EverDrives have been the de facto standard for many years. The price of these flash carts are $160 for the EverDrive X7 and $100 for the EverDrive X5 as of the making of this episode. These are on the expensive side, no question, but they are a very worthy investment. About 6 months ago, however, a new Nintendo 64 Flash Cart entered the market, known as the Summer Cart 64. This little gem of a cart costs around $50. I bought mine from AliExpress for $48 and after shipping to my house was around $55. What makes the Summer Cart 64 so awesome is that it's not just a cheap flash cartridge, it offers almost all the same features as an EverDrive X7 and in some instances even improves upon them. An EverDrive X7 will cost you $160, a Summer Cart will cost you less than a third. So let's talk about what this little gem can do. First of all, the Summer Cart 64 supports 64DD games. This makes it possible to play every single N64DD disc out there, including the RandNet stuff, the F0X 64DD expansion, and even emulating the prototype USA N64DD BIOS. The Summer Cart 64 supports all known CIC security chips, and all regions are supported. PAL, NTSC, even IQ ROMs and ALEC 64 ROMs, homebrew ROMs, and many other things. You can tweak specific configuration items at the game level, and it will simply save it to a game-specific INI file, so you'll never need to change the settings more than once per game. The Summer Cart 64 also contains a very useful USB port for connecting up to a PC. This feature has different use cases. You can use it for development of Nintendo 64 homebrew, you can update the real-time clock remotely from your PC, it can be also used to update the Summer Cart 64 firmware, and if you are someone that is developing or interested in building Nintendo 64 games, then a Summer Cart 64 may be something that you might be interested in. Now, I do want to address a couple of things first before we move on and talk about the device in more detail. There is a little bit of confusion about 64DD support on EverDrives, and I'm here to set the record straight. Once again, an EverDrive X7 does everything a Summer Cart 64 does, and it indeed will run 64DD games. And if you already own an EverDrive X7, there's probably no real reason for you to buy this. However, if you do own an X5 or one of the earlier EverDrives or a Super 64 knockoff, this cart would be a worthy upgrade that you're looking for. Not only is it much cheaper, it's also open source, which means that anyone can build their own if they want. Not only this, the open source GitHub page means that the community will always be there to update and maintain the features of this device. An EverDrive X5 and X7, while they are indeed excellent flash carts, they're also closed source devices, and that may not be a big deal now, but it may become an issue in the future. So let's take a closer look at this Summer Cart 64. The cartridge itself comes in different designs. As mentioned, this is mine from AliExpress, but I've seen other designs from other sellers. Just like the open source Saru that we reviewed for the Sega Saturn a few months back, different companies will come up with their own designs and their own branding, but make no mistake, this is all based on the exact same open source design. The clear plastic on my cartridge here gives you a look inside. And the first thing you'll notice is the battery. This is for the real-time clock that can be set by connecting the cart to a PC via USB. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on in this episode. There's also an SD card slot for the micro SD card, and this is obviously where all your ROMs will live. Now, the one that I bought came with a 16GB SD card, and it was supplied with a ton of preloaded games from all different regions, as well as even 64DD ROMs as well. On the right hand side is a USB-C port. As we mentioned, we can connect this up to a PC for some additional features, and at the back is a red button. Now this is used for swapping discs when using the 64DD functionality, and that's pretty much it. Pretty standard stuff for a N64 Flash cartridge. Now, plugging it in and turning on the N64, the first thing that you will notice is the menu loads very quickly. And this is one thing that I really noticed with the Summer Cart 64, is that it's very fast. It loads up even the largest 64 megabyte ROMs in a matter of seconds. Now, according to the Summer Cart 64 website, the micro SD card slot and the USB port operate at a peak speed of about 23.8 megabytes per second. Even the largest retail ROMs can be loaded in just a couple of seconds. And this is exactly the behavior that I'm seeing here. Now, as someone that's going from a very ancient EverDrive cartridge that I've had for years, this would take about a good 20 to 30 seconds to load a 64 megabyte ROM like Conker's Bad Fur Day. The Summer Cart 64 absolutely destroys that in comparison. Now, I don't own a EverDrive X7, so I can't do a side-by-side comparison, but the Summer Cart 64 website does claim that it's the fastest flash cart on the market. And you know what? I'm not really one to disagree. This thing loads like a beast. So loading ROMs is fast and compatibility is what you would expect. Excellent. So far, I haven't come across any commercial games that won't load. And I'm also able to load PAL region ROMs just fine on this NTSC console. Japanese region ROMs also load perfectly. Every known save type found in retail games are also supported. Saves are automatically flushed to the micro SD card during gameplay, and you'll notice each folder with ROMs in them will also contain a save subfolder with the particular save games for each ROM. Compatibility also extends to things like ROM hacks and homebrew, of course, with many demos and various things loading just fine as you would expect. The N64 expansion pack games are also detected and supported, but let's get into some more of the interesting stuff, the 64DD support. Now, I've never really played around with any 64DD games in the past. While the hardware is totally cool, I never really invested the time or the money into owning one, so I'm going into this quite blind. Now, probably the most popular 64DD game is F-Zero X Expansion Kit, which is a 64DD disc add-on that works in conjunction with the original game. So I was quite curious about how this would even work. Well, it was quite simple in the end. Select the original Japanese ROM from the list, but don't run it. Then back out and select the 64DD ROM, press the R button, and then select Launch with ROM. This will take the cartridge ROM and apply it to the 64DD ROM and load up perfectly. And this is pretty awesome stuff. I was able to test out the track editor and mess around with that, and I was even able to save a track known as MVG, and I saved this without issue to the Summer Cart 64, and with a subsequent reboot, I was able to load this track back in. So saving and loading with the 64DD on the Summer Cart 64 works just fine. Mario Artist Paint Studio is another popular 64DD ROM that runs perfectly fine as well, but I really couldn't navigate my way around. Now, I am told that the red button on the back is to eject discs with. I'm not entirely sure as to the use case for something like this, but I'm assuming it's possible to swap discs in Mario Artist Paint Studio. Another cool feature of the Summer Cart 64, it also supports ALEC 64 ROMs. Now, ALEC 64 is an arcade platform developed in conjunction with Sega and Nintendo, which is based on Nintendo 64 hardware. There were only around 11 games officially released for the system. 2 games also released on the Nintendo 64. Now, loading an ALEC 64 ROM initially wouldn't work for me. It came up with a black screen, but thanks to an easy per ROM configuration, I found that the problem was just to tap the R button and change the CIC to use the ALEC 64 CIC 5101. All these games would then boot without issue. ALEC 64 is a very obscure arcade platform, but it's cool to be able to check out and load these ROMs here. And if you are a developer, the USB port is a very powerful feature to have for a cartridge that costs just $50. There's no USB driver that needs to be installed on your PC either. Just connect your cartridge via USB-C to your PC and it will be detected easily. As mentioned, you can set your real-time clock and update your firmware, but where the USB port really shines is if you're into homebrew development. It takes just a few seconds to upload an entire N64 ROM via USB. And even better, allows you to debug and modify the game on the fly, as it's loaded directly into the Flash Cart portion of RAM that contains the location of the ROM that's currently loaded, so you can do things like on-the-fly patching if you want to. But it's not all good news. One feature that is currently not supported on the Summer Cart 64 are Game Shark cheat codes, and my understanding is that this feature is not currently being worked on. But hey, for $50, this is a stellar Flash Cart that supports almost your entire N64 needs. It's faster than an EverDrive X7, and it's definitely much cheaper than an X7, but the X7 still is the winner with some more features. But I'm all about choice and competition as a customer, and I bought this Summer Cart 64 out of my own pocket, and I do think that the device is superb. Definitely recommended if you're looking for an N64 Flash Cart that won't break the bank. I'll leave a link to the AliExpress seller I purchased mine from, and don't blame me if the link dies in a couple of weeks from now. It does tend to happen for some reason. But you shouldn't have any difficulty finding one just about everywhere. My only advice is don't overpay for them. I've seen some sellers asking north of $100. It's not worth that much, and it certainly didn't cost them anywhere near that much to manufacture. But that's going to be all for today's episode. I did hope that you enjoyed this look at the Summer Cart 64. I think it's an exceptional piece of kit, and something that I'll definitely be using myself working on my various homebrew projects for the Nintendo 64. We're going to leave it here for today's episode. Thank you so much. If you like this episode, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.